Welcome to Listen by Gene Ginsberg. This audio experience and podcast is all about social media, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, and interviews with top entrepreneurs in the digital and social space. I am your host, Gene Ginsberg, digital marketing expert, #1 best-selling author, and award-winning entrepreneur. I will be sharing with you strategies, tips, and tactics on how to grow your business and your social media following. Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, Gene Ginsberg here on another episode of Listen by Gene Ginsberg. And today, very excited, I have a special guest, Elizabeth Sheils. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I'm very excited to learn about what you're doing, about your entrepreneurial journey. So let's jump right in. So tell us about your background.
Yeah, so I started out as a wedding planner in the Pacific Northwest, and I was working at a company, and we would produce about 150 weddings a year between the market. We're in basically Seattle, Portland, and Bend, Pacific Northwest. And a couple years ago, we were looking for some technology, and we just couldn't find what we were needing to help streamline the wedding planning process. So that, when working with clients and their vendors to produce and get to that big, beautiful wedding day. So my co-founder and I, Nora, we ended up just very naively saying, let's build technology for our company. And that snowballed into a company called Rock, Paper, Coin. That is a firm that is, bringing together vendors and engaged couples to do the contract and invoicing process. As some of your listeners may know, the wedding industry is made up of small to medium-sized businesses right now. And a lot of are, just looking for technology that's specific to the industry. So we went on a roller coaster of a ride to get to this point, but we are now excited to have, one platform where businesses come and be that burden off of like working with suppliers and saving people time and money.
Wow. So that is that's a great way to create a business for yourself, is just finding a need, right? Like, scratch the itch. That basically is what we're saying here. So when did you create the actual software? Like, how long ago was that?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, we were, commiserating over that our job had into babysitting. So for any wedding plan listening, I'm sure you know those pain points all too well. And we really just did like, let's test out a bunch of software that's on the market. And so we did that for a year, and really was built for the industry. So nothing really worked to help streamline it, just kind of further drove like a disconnect. And then we went in and did a ton of market research. We talked to actually 300 wedding planners nationwide. So it took a lot of time to just kind of get our head wrapped around of what we wanted to build. And from there, we got a prototype, started doing some testing, and we just launched last August officially, but we used it internally for the 3 months to flush out as many bugs as possible. And then kind of in November went more like with a nationwide, public launch. So just hit our 1 year, which has been exciting and kind of a crazy ride.
Wow. Well, congratulations. It's now that it's been a year. So how is this different? How is this software different, let's say, from like the Knot or other big softwares, or I guess companies out there that are in the space?
Yeah, great question. So the Knot and Weddingmeyer are awesome. They are, B2C. So they are really going after the couples that are engaged and getting married. And they're kind of a marketplace of saying like, hey, here's, a bunch of vendors you can reach out to. So more of like a resource for those engaged couples. Where we really different is we are B2B. So we're, promoting and going after the businesses in the wedding industry. So if you're a florist, a baker, a wedding planner, photographer, we are streamlining that workflow. So when a couple that is coming to you and wants to book your services, it's an automated process. So you no longer have to send out like payment reminders. You don't have to ask them to print and sign a contract and mail it back to you. We're going to take that and make it a completely digital experience. the millennials and Gen Z that are coming up and getting married, they've only known an industry with technology. So really the wedding industry does have to change at this moment in time to be serving this new type of client. Having a checkbook is just not something that like millennials or Gen Zs are going to have readily available, but they are going to have their phone. So they still want to sign contracts and they still want to make payments. They just want to do it on their phone. So we are working to kind of take the businesses, keep their system still in place, but move it digital. So then the couples who are now wanting to book their services, they have that digital mobile experience that they've always wanted.
Right, right. That's so true. Yes. I guess people who are getting married are now younger millennials and Gen Zs for the most part right now. But yes,
Right.
absolutely. They grew up on all this stuff. They grew up in a digital space and digital world before you and I. We
Yeah.
grew up more in an analog space. So I can totally understand that. So what was the inspiration behind it? I mean, was it just that you felt like there wasn't really any a marketplace like this for vendors in your industry?
Yeah, exactly. There just wasn't anything that was built for the businesses. I think the wedding industry has a lot that's built for the couples getting married. And so we really wanted to take that opportunity to streamline, I mean, not only our workflow personally at our company, but in addition, the retail rates to pay for, big box subscriptions, it's just really hard as a small business owner to, pay out, $250 a month here, $500 a year here. And it all adds up and eats into your profitability. So we thought, well, what if we bring, all of these businesses under one roof? We go out and then we work with the providers and we secure bigger discounts. So, right now our payment provider, we've partnered with Stripe. Because we have all of these, payments being processed now under one roof, our payment, processing fee to these vendors is 2.5%. So we're passing along these discounts, for the contract services, the invoicing. They can get them now at a bigger discount because we're going out and negotiating on their behalf, as one big group. So there's just a lot more, leverage that we have to help these small companies be more profitable and streamline their businesses.
Right. And what was the inspiration for the name?
Yeah, the name, it was pretty funny. We originally were just on paper coin, or like paper being, contracts, coin being the payment. And we sat on it for like months and we were constantly Googling it, having our friends Google it. Well, somebody came in and bought the domain and then tried to come back and sell it to us for like a crazy amount of money. So we were like so sad, and we had a big list of other names that we were working. So Nora and I were like, okay, let's just, rock, paper, scissors for this. And it just kind of hit us. We were like, oh my gosh, like rock, paper, coin, rock, engagement ring, like kind of can play into this. But then, paper, coin, it's a name that is enough that it could go into other like sector businesses. It's not being specific. So we kind of put on it and loved it.
Wow, that's really cool. I think I can see the correlation, rock engagement rings. That's kind of a cool name. I was just, when I saw it, I was like, what was behind that? How did you come up with such a unique name for a company that does software for businesses in the wedding space, So
Totally.
yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a little bit about what's been going on the last year, and of course with the changes in the pandemic. How has that affected your business? I mean, obviously weddings kind of had to be canceled for the most part in 2020, or at least become very, very small. So how's that impacted your industry and your business?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like weddings are traditionally recession proof, as was evident kind of through 2007 and 9. It's really just like that once in a lifetime event. So people are willing to splurge and they've saved for it, for many years. But COVID, it really served up like a big piece of humble pie to the industry. And it really, hit home when the stay-at-home orders went into place, and it brought all of those like celebratory gatherings to a halt. It was something that the industry had never experienced before. So with a lot of these, small to medium-sized businesses, a majority of them are creative. So this sent everybody into like a big scramble, trying how to stay afloat, move to virtual appointments. A lot of businesses are not necessarily like up to date with their technology and kind of digital, footprint for their business. So it really was on a lot of businesses. It's an industry that thrives on being in person. So, now that we're, kind of at the end of this year, there's really no like big certainty to like hang our hats on. I think, obviously with the positive like vaccine information that's coming out, there's hope for a good 2021. But I think what, has been great to see is that a lot of businesses took this COVID break to learn technology and streamline their kind of workflow to have more technology in place. I think that's been the thing that we've like really seen across the industry. There's more, obviously there's a million Zoom meetings, but there's now virtual tours that are happening at venues. More people are accepting, and doing online invoicing and digital payments, electronic, contracts. Those were all things that were not common in the wedding industry. So watching that unfold has been really pretty amazing, that the industry as a whole is resilient. And yes, there will be fallout that is devastating, in any creative space. But a lot of people have worked really hard to make sure that when things can come back, that their business practices are, the best that they can be.
Right. That's so true. And I hope that that's been happening, and these small businesses in the wedding space have been moving towards more of a digital and technical space, because that's definitely been going forward in general in like the industry. I mean, just in business, I guess I would say in general. So I'm hoping that, they're taking the time to do that, because that is such a big piece of it, right? And that's what you're also offering to them, is that having that digital presence, or I guess digital transformation, if you will. This podcast is brought to you by the Digital Marketing Method monthly group coaching program, your methodology for growing your business and your social media following. Join me and my group of supportive entrepreneurs and learn how you can grow your business and your social media following, where we cover topics such as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, email marketing, and so much more. Go to dmgroup.online, dmgroup.online.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. We launched at the end of a, 2019 wedding season. And so we were so excited to have like a big 2020 wedding season, and that just, didn't happen. And so we were scrambling, internally to figure out like, what do we do? Like, how can we pivot? But we saw early on in April and May that our sign up and adoption rate was just skyrocketing. And we were like, oh, wait, I guess now more people have time. They're not, head down, working super hard on these weddings and executing them and spending long hours, on site. They have more time now to be adopting new technology. So we kind of wedged ourselves in at this really interesting opportunity where, yes, like our transactions, are smaller at their deposits. We're not seeing those big transactions happen for the invoicing, but the signups are crazy because people are now realizing how important it is to have that digital experience, not only just for these millennials and Gen Z that are coming up, but really just so that they're not do everything in person, that they can still book weddings with distance and digital experience.
Right. And are weddings still happening? Because for friends that I've had, a lot of them had to postpone or cancel their weddings this year. So are weddings still happening, or are they just like really, really small?
They, probably two ways to look at this. I would say, on the coast, they're probably a little bit more conservative in the pandemic. So where we're based, in the Pacific Northwest, like no weddings happening. But there are still weddings happening in, Middle America and some of, other states. They are still having some of the bigger weddings take place and have some social distancing measures that they're doing. As a whole, I would say the majority, we see the statistics get somewhere between 85 to 87% of weddings in 2020 postponed to 2021. Now, what will be really interesting to watch what happens in 2021 is that some of these weddings, they had micro weddings. So they had, under 20 people. Well, the average budget was still $14,000 for these micro weddings. And they're considered a completely separate event. People, did maybe some food and beverage, some flowers. They kept it pretty small, but they still spent a lot of money. Their budget, for the bigger reception, maybe $40,000, $50,000, that's still intact, and that's still to be spent in 2021. So while, yes, there wasn't a wedding season, about, I think, 76% of budgets remained the same or increased because of those micro weddings. So it'll just be interesting to see, how the 2021 wedding season shakes out, and if people do still spend that full budget amount.
Yeah, I hope that that's the case, and I hope that we have a wedding season in 2021, because I don't this is going to air beginning of January. This is going to air, so what's it, January 2021. So right now, when we're talking about it, I don't know. I mean, the changes. I guess we're starting to see changes and perhaps a vaccine, but who knows how things are going to shake out. You never, I thought this thing was going to be over by the time summer rolled around in 2020, and it was not even remotely the case. So I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed for the wedding season in 2021.
Yeah. We are too. And, just all live events. I think that it's just been super hard on not only the wedding industry, but so many industries that really thrive off of those in-person, celebrations and events.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's how we are, right? As humans, we like to hang out with others. And it's just been such a weird experience, a weird year for everyone. But yeah, I'm hoping that things will change in the new year. It's just, you never know how, this thing, this thing has progressed. I did not expect this to be the case, honestly. Speaking now at the end of 2020, it's just been a weird experience, and did not expect this to be the case at all. So one last question I usually like to ask my podcast guests is, and we talked a little bit about this, I guess touched upon the predictions, but what is your prediction for the industry? And that could be your industry specifically, talking about the wedding industry, but also it could be anything, terraforming Mars, AI, self-driving cars, whatever you decide. It's a very open-ended question.
Yeah, no, I love that question. I think short term, the industry is going to bounce back from COVID. So, 2021, there might still be some impacts, but people are going to continue getting married. They're going to continue spending a lot of money. Couples plan, and save for these weddings for years. So the industry will be back. Some experts expect a 33 to 40% growth in 2021, and that will trickle into 2022. So I think that's kind of short term. My prediction, my hopeful prediction, I should say, is a bounce back. Long term, I think it's just going to be, we're going to see more technology really driving into the wedding industry, from 3D venue mapping to these virtual appointments, to even a virtual aspect at some weddings. I think that's really going to be where the wedding industry heads long term. There are no technology companies that have come into the wedding space specifically built for the industry. I think it's a hard vertical to enter into and figure out how to get to profitability, because it's a bunch of small to medium-sized businesses. So big companies, they don't necessarily see this big opportunity or this big marketplace. And I think that's really short-sighted, for a couple of reasons. So I think that as we watch some of these newer technology companies, us included, right? Let's hope. I think that it's going to show some of the bigger companies that there is a way to produce technology for this industry. There will be a way to, monetize it on some level, but it's a massive industry, in the US alone, but globally. And there's just a really big disconnect with how the industry is operating right now, and it's very outdated. So I would predict long term, we're just going to see a lot more technology, some of the bigger names entering into the space to try to get a little bit of a market share. An interesting statistic out there right now that no major, contractor invoice company that is in the wedding industry has more than 5% of the market share right now. So I think that just goes to show, there aren't these big companies that are coming in because it's such an unknown space, unknown vertical for some of the bigger names. And I think as we watch technology adapt and the younger generations come up, that's going to change drastically.
I love everything that you're saying, because I am such a big technology. That's a big part of my mission of my business, and just in general, I love technology. I think that's what's moving things along. And I, of course, I work with a lot of businesses too that are more traditional, and I wouldn't say all of them are traditional, but a lot of them don't have a digital presence or don't use technology. And part of having a digital presence is also streamlining your business. And so that's been a big piece of what we do and how we help our companies that we work with. But one more question I did want to ask you. I think that would be pretty relevant to the audiences who are listening, who potentially might be interested in creating their own software or going down that path. So it sounds like you didn't come from a technology background, right? You were a wedding planner. So tell me about your experience in creating software from someone who might not be very technologically savvy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It has been and will continue to be an absolutely wild ride. As a technical co-founder, it was a steep learning curve. In our first meeting with the agency that was creating our prototype, I probably had 4 pages of words that I had to go home and Google. I was like, I don't even know what they're saying. I am in over my head. But I think what we learned in all of this is that the entrepreneur world is incredibly giving. And so people who have been in your shoes and walked, that same road, they look back all the time to try and help pull you forward. So, getting to know people in your market that have, been entrepreneurs, and it can be in a different industry. There is just so much to learn from somebody who has walked in those shoes before. So getting really good advisors, really good mentors, even before you get into the development is essential. You can Google, how do I start a company? And sure, it's going to start with a business plan. But so many companies fail. If you can really do a good job in surrounding yourself with people who have been successful, your odds are going to skyrocket. You will be able to bounce ideas off of them. You will be able to, use them as a resource, what worked, what didn't work. And then a lot of it is just going to be trial and error. You have to be resilient as an entrepreneur. So, you will hear no more than you hear yes. And you just have to take those no's as, fire in your belly to keep doing and believing in your product.
Yes, I love that. That's definitely another takeaway from this conversation is for someone like you who, you mentioned you're like, I went to this meeting, I had no idea what they were saying, but you still moved on, right? You still pushed forward. This isn't going to deter you from creating a software, even though you might not have a software or a technology background. You're like, well, that's fine. This sucks, and maybe I don't know a lot of it now, but I'll learn over time, but that's not going to deter me from moving forward.
Totally.
I love that.
We had so many that were in our cheering for us. I would say that the one big thing that we had to learn the hard way is we talked about fundraising, and we talked about how to go out and raise money for the company. And that was great. We got really good advice, but we never asked the question of when. And that ended up really, being a hard lesson to learn, is that you as a, entrepreneur, if your business model has to take on, outside, you have to fundraise early and all the time. That is going to be your primary objective. I think we knew we were going to be fundraising, and we started late, and we ran out of money, and we encountered all of these hiccups. And if we had just started earlier, it takes probably 6 to 8, maybe even up to a year to raise money. So starting really early is just something that I wish that I had asked the question of when, instead of how or what, or when was the biggest thing that I missed as an entrepreneur.
Right. Absolutely. That's another key takeaway from this podcast episode is if you're looking to create a company, especially if you're looking to fundraise or find capital investment for a software or something like that, then it's definitely, you have to consider when and how often you are fundraising, because you can run out of runway. That happens all the time with tech companies, is they fundraise, but even if they have some capital, they just maybe run out of runway, and then things pause, and then you have to start doing it again and finding more capital until you are sufficient enough. Or so absolutely, I think this is a great point also to consider is when to fundraise, and that's I guess the point is early and often, right? Vote early, vote often.
Yes, all the time, every time.
Awesome. Well, that was very insightful. Thanks for sharing that. I was very curious to know how you decided to go down that path, but also what was your experience like when it came to fundraising, fundraising, but also how to create a technology from someone who's not, very tech savvy. So I'm sure that other people who are listening to this podcast would love to hear about that. Because I'm sure a lot of them are also in the same boat. So thanks so much for being here. This is super helpful. How can our audiences get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So our website is rockpapercoin.com. You are welcome to reach out. You can follow us on Instagram, rockpapercoin. You can also find us on Facebook. And then, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is on the website. I am now, being one of those entrepreneurs that has walked for a few years in these shoes, and the soles are wearing thin, but I do want to look back and I do want to help others. So any questions, anything that I can provide to somebody who's thinking about starting a company, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Sheils. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.